Viswanathan Anand threatens to checkmate at least 4 times in this World Championship match against Veselin Topalov, which eventually leads to his victory. Now, Anand is playing with the black pieces, and Topalov is playing with the white pieces. And this is the Queen's Gambit decline, which is being declined now. And it looks like Knight f3 is now played, and Knight comes to f6, and if Knight c3 is now played next. And this is the three knight variation of the Queen's Gambit declined on the board now. So Bishop is played to e7 now, and Bishop to g5 is played by Topalov, attacking the knight, and h6 is now played, attacking the bishop there. Bishop goes back to h4, and Anand immediately castles on the king side as of the sixth move. Now e3 is played by Topalov, allowing his bishop to develop and also supporting this pawn, this gambit pawn over here. And the knight jumps to e4, creating a double attack on this e4 on this bishop over here. So the bishop takes the bishop, and the queen takes the bishop back, activating the queen. And now rook comes to c1. Topalov places the rook to c1, and c6 is played by Anand, supporting his pawn center, and bishop goes to e2. And Anand immediately takes the knight with his knight, and the rook takes back the knight, activating the rook into the c3 square. And after that, the pawn is taken by Anand, and the bishop comes forward to c4 to take back the pawn. So this activates both his Topalov's rook and bishop. And after that, Topalov immediately castles on the king side as well after on the 30th move, and b6 is played by Anand basically. So his intent might be to bring his bishop to b7, but basically it also weakens this particular square. So after the bishop to d3 move, this pawn is also already under attack. So you either have to defend this pawn, or which basically Topalov can bring his pieces and attack this pawn. So Anand chose not to defend it and push the pawn to c5. So now the bishop goes to e4, attacking the rook. So the rook went to b8, and which also will help you to put the bishop on the b7 square later on if required. So the queen goes to c2, creating a battery. You can place a check here, but it's a harmless check right now. So the knight jumps to f6, creating an attack on the bishop here. So here d into c5 is played actually. So and knight takes e4 is played. So actually there was an earlier combination. Instead of d into c5, if Anand had taken this particular, instead of this knight takes bishop, so Anand could have basically taken this pawn over here. So if you take the pawn, and if the rook takes the pawn back, you can take the bishop here, and basically one of this you cannot take back with your queen, because if you take back with your queen, this rook will be gone basically. So it will be gone like this. So but that didn't happen in the game. Anand takes the bishop with the knight, and the queen takes back, and after that this pawn is taken, and the queen goes back to c2, attacking this pawn twice. So immediately bishop to b7 is played by Anand, attacking this knight over here. So if this knight is taken by the bishop, it creates a double pawn and also exposes the king, which is actually don't have much defense because all other pieces are on the other side of the board. So knight jumps to d2 into the d file, and immediately the rook comes to d8, taking control of this open d line for Anand, and f3 is played, reducing this impact of this powerful bishop over here. And bishop goes to a6 because of that move, attacking the rook. So the rook goes to f2, and rook to d7 is played by Anand, with intending to double the rooks later on in the game, creating more pressure on this d line. And g3 is now played by Anand. So you might be wondering why this pawn is not taken. So if this pawn is taken here like this, this move will happen. So here what will happen is that if the queen takes, if the queen moves away to here or somewhere else, then you can basically there's more pressure on this particular piece, the knight. So or if the queen takes back, you can take back this rook for that basically. So the pawns get exchanged and the rooks get exchanged, but black will be more active in such a scenario. So g3 is played instead of that, which will allow the king to come up to g2, a safer square in this game context. And rook now comes to d8, thereby doubling the rooks and creating a strong battery. And king to g2 is now played, which basically vacate all the back rank of white. And sometimes when you vacate the back rank, and if any pieces find themselves their way into the back rank, it can create a huge problem for us. So bishop to d3 attacking the queen is played, so the queen retreats to c1, and now the bishop retreats to a6, creating a double attack on this particular knight over here. And the rook goes to a3 attacking the bishop, so the bishop goes to b7, and the knight develops to b3 attacking the pawn over here. You can take that pawn because it's under so an extra support for that pawn is provided by Anand by moving his rook to c7, and knight to a5 is now played. And with the knight to a5 move, this the bishop is under attack now, so you don't want to trade this bishop for the knight because it's a very powerful bishop. So Anand retrieves his bishop to a8, and the knight jumps back to c4. A much better square. Knights are less effective on the side of the board. They are more effective towards the center. And e5 is now played by the under with the intent of attacking this pawn structure on the king side of Topalov. And e4 is played by Topalov, countering that the progression of that pawn. So Anand immediately plays f5, attacking the pawn which Topalov just played, and e into f5 is now played, and Anand plays e4 now. Now you have to take this pawn back, otherwise that pawn will take this pawn, creating a check, and you cannot take this pawn. Yes, you can take with your rook, and until then the rook will be gone. But even in that scenario, I won't take that because this bishop is too powerful. So after that, the queen comes in and places a check, and the king goes here. Also when the queen places check, there is an attack on the knight here, and the next move increases that attack because there is two attacks now, and this knight is basically hanging. At the same time, there is a checkmate threat over here. So if the queen goes here, it's game over because the king cannot go back because this bishop is here preventing the retreat, so it'll be check. So you have to protect the knight and also protect this square from prevent this queen from coming into this square. So the knight goes here basically. The knight goes to e3, protecting this square, and the queen immediately goes to e8, threatening a next checkmate because if the queen goes here, it'll be game over. The same scenario happens again. So g4 is played, preventing that move, and another plays h5, attacking that pawn. So here, instead of you cannot take the pawn. If you take the pawn here like this, it'll be checkmate soon, basically. So you cannot take that pawn. So instead of taking the pawn, the king comes to h4, basically. So after that, Anand immediately plays the move g5 with a check, and en passant results, and the queen comes to g6. He takes the pawn back. Now you cannot take this pawn with your take the black pawn with this pawn because it's pinned, basically. So immediately the queen comes to f1, creating a check threat here. It's not mate or anything, but it's a check threat, and the rook comes to g4, creates a check, and it's only one square for the king, and so the king goes to h3. And if the knight takes, you will be wondering what happened. If the knight takes, the queen will take, and it'll checkmate. The game will be over. So the knight cannot take here, so that's why the king move, and the rook comes to e7, creating an attack on this knight, and also it can go to any of these back rank and attack the king at any point of time. And the rook comes to f8 and create a check, and the king moves to g7, one of the squares, and the knight jumps in and to f5 and creates a check. So Topalov is basically trying to create a counter attack and to corner Anand, but Anand moves to his king to h7. After this, the rook comes to g3, and Anand goes for the rook exchange, and the pawn takes the rook back, basically, and the check happens at g4 plus, and the king basically had to move to h2, and Anand brings his other rook into the play to e2 and creates a check. And now the king had to go to the holy square g1, basically, which also create this check for Anand, that is g2 plus. Here, if you move your king to h1, in the next move the queen will come here and the game will be over. So you had to take it with your queen. So the queen for a rook and a bishop. I think it was fair trade, but Anand is still up in the game by a lot. And now the check happens to e2, and the king retreats to h3, and Anand pushes c4, threatening to queen the pawn, and this pawn is also hanging. And now a5 is played for a4 because you don't want this pawn marching down the board, creating pressure on you. So a5 prevents that. and the rook comes to f6, intending to go here and place a check and create a counter attack, and the king moves to g8, and the knight jumps to h6, creating a check. So the king moved to g7, attacking both the knight and the rook. So the rook moves along the sixth rank, because otherwise the king can take the pawn. So it moved to b6, and immediately the queen comes to e4, and after that the king moved to h2, and the king of Anand moved to h7, and the rook comes to d6, and Anand just places his queen at e5, attacking both the rook and the pawn here. So once the knight jumps to f7, protecting this rook and also attacking the queen just jumps to b2 and takes the pawn and creates a check, because it's a forced move. The king moved, and after this the queen retrieves to g7. So Anand basically is attacking this knight, so the knight had to move somewhere. You only have few squares to go. If it goes here, you can still bring your head, and this pawn will queen. So basically at this point Topalov resigned the game, and Anand won the match, and also he went on to win the World Championship match of 2010. So that's it from us, guys. I hope you liked the game. It's a very attacking game, lot of attacking combinations. That's why I really like this game, and I thought I'll put it up. So thanks for watching. If you haven't followed or subscribed, please do so.